Well now, what do we have here? Is this Band of Brothers the RTS game? Well, hello again there, friends and fans. Raptor here, and this is our first look at a brand new DLC for a game by the name of Gates of Hell OSTFRONT, or Call to Arms Gates of Hell OSTFRONT, getting an Airborne DLC for the United States. Welcome aboard, good to see you all here. This game is bangin'. There is so much DLC and content for this game now, and so many people supporting it that the developers are certainly proceeding with a lot of great new content that hopefully will then become great mods for everybody in the community. This is an incredible, just a very, very good RTS game that has third-person and first-person elements to it where you can individually command the soldiers and vehicles like tanks or half-tracks, and then, of course, now getting a Airborne DLC to focus around, well, pretty much everything you may have seen in Band of Brothers, and hopefully much, much more. The D-Day invasion via the air troops there, and of course then some other campaigns that they were involved in, including the Battle of the Bulge. Now obviously this is going to have a lot more units now and vehicles and things that we haven't seen before, and that's a good thing. And I think the developers of this game are doing a great job in bringing new and never before seen DLCs, but then also things that we've always wanted. Previously they've covered things like Finland and Finland's 3 different campaigns against the Soviets, and then of course the kind of Germans defending against invasion and whatnot, and it brought a lot of great new vehicles for everybody, for the Germans and for some captured equipment for the Finnish, and a lot of cool new game modes came from that as well, including the Conquest mode, where meaning you can use that faction within that mode. And so that means then we're getting a US faction that will be an Airborne faction, which hopefully will then be playable in multiplayer. And of course, this opens the door for modders to then make something, for example, Operation Mercury and the invasion of Greece, the further invasion of airborne troops like the Fallschirmjäger across all of Europe. It's possible that modders could bring that in. It's possible that the developers could bring that in, and I hope to see a lot more of this. In the early days of a game by the name of Men of War, which you may have heard of as Men of War Assault Squad 2, well, even before then, there was a long time ago game known as Men of War, and there were some really interesting missions from that. I think they had a, what was it, the Black Sea DLC or something? It had something to do with the Marines. I forget exactly the name of it, but it was the Soviet Marines and a lot of naval operations around there, and I think there was even some airborne missions there. And so I really hope that this continues to open the door to what is some incredible content. I think even to this day, one of the best World War II strategy games we ever got was the presentation in Company of Heroes. So many years ago, the original Company of Heroes, even with this type of nature, being primarily opening with the airborne troops and the D-Day invasions by the Americans, really then again brought some really great stuff for the Allies, all of them, like the British. And then eventually we got Company Heroes 2, and the British were added to that, and we got a lot of great story around World War II from Company Heroes, and that was a perfect example of a great presentation on how you make a World War II campaign. Whether or not it was going to be a first-person shooter or whatnot, that was really the interesting way to do it. And seeing everything that you might recognize from Band of Brothers 2, it's very interesting how they've chosen to film it this way, or portray it this way. I mean, you are immediately recognizing some of the scenes, like for example with the soldier, pointing a handgun at another one, and some of the famous battles, including the initial landings, and as I mentioned before, the Battle of the Bulge. All of those were featured in the HBO series, and I hope that if we ever get another DLC for this game for the Americans, that we also get the Japanese, and we get to see the Pacific. Right, like literally the Pacific Theater, but also presented in the way of the Pacific. Now, going back to this DLC specifically, this Airborne DLC is certainly doing a lot of showcasing the aircraft that are dropping the troops, and also the paratroopers themselves. And I've noticed a little bit of jankiness in the trailer. When you see that some of those DCs take off, they're kind of like really clunky or like stiff when they move, and that's hilarious because it's almost like how it is in Men of War Assault Squad 2. A lot of the aircraft take off that way as well. In fact, aircraft aren't anything new to this game or its predecessors. In fact, there's been Mustangs, and I think Spitfires, and even Stukas and ME-109s and other things like that that would fly over the battlefield and or were part of cutscenes, or oftentimes were on the ground and people have modded them to fly because they were just supposed to be something you would destroy or protect in an airfield. Well, here at least we're seeing some of our classic American forces from the Liberation DLC, so if you haven't purchased that one, just so everybody's clear, if you get the game known as Call to Arms Gates of Hell OSTFRONT, you're essentially getting the Germans and then the Eastern Front, so the Soviets and some other mixes in there. Then you can also get a DLC for Finland, and then you can also get a DLC for the Americans on the Western Front, which does not feature these missions here. So it'll be American DLC Part 2, and then, of course, there's another DLC in there. I think that adds more missions for the Germans and the Soviets. I think it's called Scorched Earth. And I'm hoping that we get a lot more DLCs, though. But primarily, I think we're going to see then a lot more of what seems to be the 101st Airborne, and then is it the 82nd, the 83rd? I always forget the number. I think it's the 82nd, and possibly some other units, too, and other game modes. Now, their recent community update, which we covered here on the channel with quote-unquote base building, Digital Mindsoft, like a lot of developers now, is doing a great job of providing a paid DLC and then a free content update for everybody. I started noticing this around the days of like Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo, and then games like American Truck Simulator and Euro Truck Simulator, and now I'm noticing it more places where developers will release a DLC with new content that's paid, but then also a new community, like a whole game-wide thing that everybody can be a part of. And so I'm really happy to see something like that in the new community update that adds the Last Stand game mode, but I feel like it needed more maps. When we played that, it was basically just a map where the enemy was attacking from one direction, and we were basically fighting them, you know, like facing east. Otherwise, we can be surrounded. And that's a cool game mode for this DLC, and hopefully we get something like that where paratroopers then have to go into a map and then actually defend it. And the more and more I'm looking at this trailer, the more and more I'm seeing some of the missions from Company of Heroes, for sure. I mean, there's the, I already forgot the name of it. It's so long ago, but there is, of course, the mission from, and I think it's even in Call of Duty as well, where, and especially in Company of Heroes, you must take the town, and then the Germans try to counterattack it with Stugs, and there's a few bridges to defend. I forget exactly what that was, but it's amazing how by just looking at this footage, I'm immediately remembering stuff from the original Call of Duty, I'm remembering stuff that I've seen from Band of Brothers, and then, of course, Company of Heroes as well. So this campaign of the 101st Airborne, The Legend, is a perfect one to pick, and I hope we get a lot of other very unique and very historically accurate factions. Perhaps a North African one focusing mostly on the Germans, but then that means we would have to get the British. So I think what the developers are doing here is maybe trying to round off everyone that the Germans fought with or against in mainland Europe. Perhaps we'll get a Spanish DLC that will cover the Spanish Civil War a little bit, maybe bring in some of their units. I mean, to be fair, the Finnish units have a lot of that stuff as well, a lot of the German equipment. And then eventually the Soviets donated a bunch. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they donated the biggest supplier of the Finnish army at one point was the Soviet Union. How interesting is that? But, yeah, I've also noticed a lot of people as I watched the trailer pointing out a few inaccuracies here, like parachute colors and this and that. Not obviously, this is a trailer, and I think it's quite easy for the devs to go in and change this. But I'm also looking at what seems to be maybe some high-res upgrades to what we may have seen before in previous Men of War games, which is fine because, honestly, these uniforms aren't going to change. This particular war is over, and this equipment's not being used anymore. So if they're taking something they've already made and upgrading it, then that's totally fine because they're trying to package it into a new DLC. But it really looks good. I'm very excited to see what we get for campaigns, very excited to see what we will get for possibly multiplayer content, possibly even the two factions, or like, you know, there's the Airborne, but there's also, you know, like the 101st and the 82nd, and there could be other units in there too that they'll be able to use. It would be very underpowered if, for example, you use this faction in multiplayer and they didn't get any armored vehicles at all. But on the other hand, they could get some airborne vehicles too, and many of us remember some of the call-outs from the previous Company of Heroes where you were able to drop AT guns on the ground, like what is the M1 or something. They're very small millimeter, like, I don't know, 37 and 40 millimeter maybe or less weapons, but also, of course, they're very powerful with their recoilless rifles. And I'm just basically basing what the developers could do in the new DLC off of what I've seen before in Company of Heroes. But hopefully, we do get a Company of Heroes / Band of Brothers remix in Call to Arms Gates of Hell OSTFRONT. And I don't think this will be a DLC onto the Liberation, but I think it's a great addition. Very interesting, though, that they've chosen to do America, which was wonderful for the Western Front, but then immediately adding another DLC onto that. But it is good to see the community accepting it with open arms, or open wings, I suppose, in this case. So very good. Now, I want to speculate then on what we will see next from Digital Mindsoft, the makers of this game, but then also, of course, what we're going to see from the modding community. And in addition to that, I also want to see the success of Men of War 2. They've been struggling a little bit, that game, and I know a lot of people prefer this one, and I do too. And many people tell me to go back to Men of War Assault Squad 2, but in all honesty, it's just outdated. Newer technologies come around, newer engines, new and better ways to play this game have come around, and now it's just presented in a different way. So in your mind, you could consider this to be Men of War 3, but I mean, honestly, top to bottom, they've done a great job of making this game even better than Men of War. In fact, the coding and all that of the previous game is so outdated that with all the lag, even with modern internet and modern technology and PCs, you'll drop a frame, and you know, a 30-minute battle could take an entire hour to play as every frame is like synced. So you know, the game will pause or lag up in order to do that, but it's less of a problem with this game. But I do want to see some more of the game modes from Men of War Assault Squad here, and this would be a good opportunity to bring that in. Again, this Airborne DLC would be perfect for yet another mode where a player gets to set up defenses and then defend against another player attacking them. That is the essential of the Last Stand mode, but that's more of a PvP, rather PvE mode. I want PvP if we want, or PvE if we want. And so hopefully there's going to be more game modes being added. Additionally, this faction could be used in Conquest. A Conquest mode is essentially like an entire capture the map mode, where you eventually get to research more technology for your faction. Example being, you could start as Germany in 1939 and then try to invade, well actually it would be like 39 to 41, I think that's how the dates are ranged as quote-unquote early war. So you could take technology that the Germans used in 39 to 41 and then start invading the Soviet Union, and then you could try to make them your main enemy, where you'll fight against them and their eventually progressing technology, and then have to conquer like the last objective. And that does take a very long time to do, and it's a very interesting game mode of attacking and defending and different objectives. That reminds me of Blitzkrieg from long ago. Does anyone remember Blitzkrieg? Or does anyone remember, of course, what is it, Sudden Strike? Yeah, those games. Man, I haven't played those. I think they made a new Sudden Strike a few years ago, and yet when I play these games, Men of War Assault Squad, and Call to Arms, and all these games that are within this wheelhouse, I feel like these are the spiritual successors to that. And so when I'm seeing things like the Karl Mortar and you know, the giant railgun artillery, it certainly reminded me of the good old Blitzkrieg. I played the original, and then of course Blitzkrieg 2, which didn't run as well on my computer that I had at the time, but yeah, it certainly got me into these games, and it's great to see them still around in a different presentation. And it always makes me wonder what would happen if we ever got, like, for example, a World in Conflict 2. That'll never happen, but that is a dream, and I'm going to stick with it. And I think it's hopefully something we see one day. So let me know down below in the comments section, what do you think about this DLC? What inaccuracies do you see? Where could some improvements be? Have you played Call to Arms Gates of Hell OSTFRONT? Do you have any of the DLCs? I'm curious to know what you feel and think about this game, and hopefully the developers will continue to add DLC to this, and then we'll work on something new in the future. I still want to see the success of Men of War 2. I hope eventually we'll see something along the lines of Men of War Vietnam again, and also maybe a World War I version of these games too, to which there already is one that exists. There is a game already called like Great War 19, I don't know if, is it 1914, 1917? That might be, I think it ranges the whole war, or 1918 I mean, and yeah, it's a very interesting game as well that plays on the Men of War Assault Squad engine, but I certainly feel like there's still room for a Vietnam maybe spin-off here with this Call to Arms Gates of Hell OSTFRONT. You know, Vietnam would be cool to see a few missions historically accurate for Vietnam and for the French and for the Americans, and also something for Korea. That'd be great too. There's a lot of potential with this game, that's all I'm saying. And so if they're doing something like this, showing just U.S. Airborne in the Western Front and going through the Ardennes and, you know, eventually the end of the campaign in Europe, we got to see more for the Pacific next. But then there's so many other places to go. Now, there's another game that you used to have to buy when you would get a Call to Arms Gates of Hell OSTFRONT, and it was called Call to Arms. And it was a modern Call to Arms Gates of Hell, basically. And it's, you know, it's got T-72s and T-80s in it, and it's quite fun. I enjoy playing that quite a bit, and haven't played it in a while. But I still feel like anytime that there's a Steam sale, definitely try to get into these games. There's a wonderful modding community, and there's quite a few tutorials out there. I've got quite a few on how to get started. And so if you've ever been wondering on, you know, how do you get into these games or what to do, this is certainly a great gateway into this. And then, of course, those classics I mentioned before, like Company of Heroes, Company Heroes 2, and so on and so forth. Men of War and those other ones are a little clunky, but I think Company of Heroes still plays out really well, and maybe even the original Call of Duty, where a lot of people in the, believe it or not, people have recreated the Call to Arms Call of Duty Modern Warfare has been recreated in Medal War Assault Squad 2. So people have taken all of the Modern Warfare campaigns, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, and created them in this game, well, the predecessor. But it's definitely, the community is so capable and so talented that they could literally take that campaign and bring it into this one. There's alternative reality missions as well, like 1946, 1947, and so on. So again, I'm excited for what the developers can do next with Call to Arms. I'm excited to what the community will do with this game, and it's really nice to see so many people keeping it alive through gaming, and that, Call of Duty's probably not going to return to World War II anytime soon, although they totally did, but it just feels like they're bored of it. But RTS games around this genre are here to stay. So more World War I. Check out other great games on the channel, including The Troop, and also what is it called? Headquarters World War II? Yeah, that's the one. And there's a lot of great ones. They're also remaking the Commandos game, and so, yeah, there's a lot of great content around World War II. 63 Days about the Polish uprising in Warsaw, the Warsaw Uprising, and so much more. So if you've been playing this game, if you like this game, there's certainly a lot of other ones out there. Let me know down below what you think about other games that you definitely would recommend to me or somebody else that's World War II or World War II adjacent, or that has mods, or I don't know, is there a Stellaris mod for World War II? I have no idea. It would be super cool as hell, though, to know. Anyway, everybody, thank you very much for watching. Thanks for being here, and I will leave you with the trailer for Call to Arms, Gates of Hell, Airborne. Take care.